We're at 3, 2, 1, clap. I see the waveform. Okay. Hello. Uh, this is Alex at Robot Cribs Industries. I figured this would be a good way to demo some of the sounds from the Consequence. It is straightforward, mostly a V4B clone. Same thing as a V4. We can get into some of the specifics of changes that I've made to make it a little bit more versatile and a little bit more stable for tour, including not made in the 70s, some other stuff like that. To go over, this is going to be a very clinical video, so we're going to try to take things. There's no pedals. I have nothing else in the chain. You can see the aux is what we're using to listen. I'm not running through a cab. The microphone I'm talking to you will be muted. Woo, SM57. I'm sure the no pop filter is really great on this. But we're going to run through some of the sounds that come out of this, and we'll run it down. So I think the first thing that we should go over is sorry about that. I'll turn off the guitar for the moment. The first thing that we have is multiple inputs. So the V4 normally has 2 inputs. They're independent. They can't be chained. And they each have their own independent sensitivity control. That is maintained here. There is a middle input, which is what we're currently using, that lets you chain them together. So it uses both. You don't have to have a daisy chain. But you can run, if you were to say, like, simulate that it's a multi-channel amp, you could use an ABY and run 2 cables and have them go into input 1 and input 2. And input 1 and input 2, those naming metrics are carried throughout the amp. So you have the sensitivity for 1 and 2, the ultra low for 1 and 2, the ultra high for 1 and 2, and the gain for 1 and 2. Each are completely independent of each other. They don't interact with each other until after these gain knobs. After that point, they are joined. So the sensitivity is similar, or is the exact same as a V4. So I'm going to play a little bit and we'll switch the sensitivity. I'm going to turn down one whole preamp. So here we are on a trebly sound. But we'll just switch the sensitivity on input 1 here. So it's the same thing. It's a sensitivity control. It does have a little bit more of a low pass. The further down you go in the sensitivity, the more negative you go. And the naming convention is maintained across it with the negative dB. So 0 is going to be like your most clean high end, and negative, you lose some volume, but you gain some low end by doing that. Next we have the ultra low switch, which has interaction with that sensitivity control, but is a really like blanket over the amp sound. Cuts a lot of volume, but is really, really low endy. So we'll do that right now. So with ultra low, oh, we're really really hot now. I should turn that down. With ultra low, I like to now because now we're gonna get into, well, let's finish with ultra high. Ultra high is the still exact same as the V4. They are minus, neutral, and plus. So we were on plus that whole time for that much brighter sound. They do interact with the gain knobs. So if you were to dime this to try to get like more of a medium gain instead of this ultra clean sound that we're on right now, if you try to push it, you will notice that the ultra high switch starts to do less and less the higher these knobs are. So, that's one of those things that you have to play around with, of how much highs do you want, and then, are you going to boost them here, keep the gains mid, and roll back some treble later? It's up to you, but they are interactive. The ultra lows and the sensitivities don't interact, but these are based around those knobs, so they interact with them in interesting ways. So I'll just swap through those real quick. So yeah, just a quick run through of how that switch works. So now we're at this point, and what I wanted to talk about is that with the join, so now I'm going to bring in the second channel. What I like to do, again, personally, is I like to have one on ultra low to push more of that low end, and have one on with ultra low off. So I have input 1 with ultra low off and input 2 with ultra low on. And now I can kind of like dial in those really low, like, I don't know if it's woofy. That sounds more like a description for fuzz, but this just like low end that you can't really describe. But yeah, it's that blanket over the amp. I can pull it in now without cutting the highs, and I can dial these two knobs as I see fit. So that's just how I like to use it. Obviously, it's up to personal use. If you want to set one, really, really hot, max out the gain, and try to run it as a 2-channel hybrid style amp. There's a ton of ways that you could run it that I can imagine, but that's how I like to do it. So next we're going to move on. We're going to skip the mid-range for a second. We're going to do the two. Bass and treble are just a back sandal stack. Still the same as the V4. And we're just, they're just subtractive, and they're great. So I'm not really going to go deep into the tone stack there. We'll just do a couple of random sounds here. I'll put the mids at middle too, so they're not doing much. We could use a tune, but we're going to move on because I do not have a tuner plugged in as per the demonstration. So the obvious next thing is the huge thing about this amp is the active mids control. So we have our same classic setup, 300 hertz, 1000 hertz, 3000 hertz. And they can do a bunch of different things. They can make you super brill, super bassy. Really just lets you move that mid-range around and let you select more. My dog is currently sniffing the camera, and I'm hoping he doesn't pause it. Looks like he's cool with it. It's just we're not using a cab because he does not like loud noises. So it's also much more typical of what people are going to hear online. So I think the aux is a good demonstration here. But yeah, let's flip through the mid controls. I'll put the mid up high so you can hear it, and then we'll put it low so it's redactive, and give it a move around. And obviously, you should change the master volume to where you'd like to sit. Right now, we're on a very, very low setting. We're not trying to push the master volume at all right now. We're just leaving it clean and not pushing the power amp, which I think is going to be more typical to what live users are going to have to do with 100 watts. It's a lot of power. Lastly, we have a non-active passive preamp output, which will let you split the preamp if you want. If you want to send it to a separate amp, depending on how much the impedance of the subsequent device that this is plugged into, you may experience a big cut in your output through the amp itself. So just be careful if you have to use a pass-through box and then still plug back into the power amp or something like that, something that will passively pull the audio out of the circuit without creating a big impedance or pull down. But I have noticed that because it's not active, it just literally splits the circuit and lets you do that. To note, if you use this preamp output, that means that the power amp is still connected, and no matter how you power up this amp, the power amp will always be on and connected and need a load. So right now we're using the aux as our load because it's a load box. But you always need a cab, a load box, or something like that to just make sure that you don't break the output transformer by having a adequate load underneath it. And then the power amp input, you can. So the master volume is after this power amp input. So if you split this preamp out, it is the full preamp. The master volume won't interact with that. And if you use the power amp input, let's say this is a slave for another amp, the master volume is still interactive there, so you can use the master volume how you see fit to control whatever the main volume of whatever this is plugged into. And that will shut off when you use this. It will shut off the preamp. So you don't have to worry about nixing all the volume knobs or anything like that. It'll disconnect the preamp and just accept whatever's coming through this jack as your main power. So that's the main run through. There's only the back of it, which has some probes for you to make sure you bias the tubes. I suggest just quad matching them so you don't have to bias them. But there is a bias knob on the inside of the amp, not the inside, on the top of the chassis, so you can't accidentally bump it. And then there also is a half power switch back there. It's a somewhat common mod in push-pull quad tube amps where you disconnect the outer two tubes, the ground connection for them, and it becomes a 50-watt amp. You do need to change the impedance, and there's always directions on the back, or you can always ask other people about it. And if you continuously run it at 50 watts instead of 100, you could just pull those two tubes and never, you don't have to wear out the heater on them, and you could just pull them. But it does require that the impedance be double what the output jack is asking for. So if you have it selected for 4, you need an 8 ohm cab to make it happy. If you have an 8, you need a 16 ohm cab. So just be aware of that if you go to use the 50 watt switch. Make sure that your impedance is matched correctly with whatever the 50 watt switch wants you to have. And if you don't use it, just make sure whenever you move around the amp or anything like that, make sure the position is where you expect it to be. It is easy to accidentally flick that knob and forget about it. And that's it. That's the whole thing. I don't know if there's anything else that you want from a demo like this. I may do pedals and other sounds to round out the concept of like what does it sound like with other stuff besides some shitty playing. But this is just more or less a clinical run through of how it's set up, how to use it, and what to expect in terms of as a player or like a purchaser. The other thing I should know, I should say the guitar is a Jazzmaster with Curtis Novak wide ranges. I think you can see that. And an aluminum neck. We're just playing on both pickups, just max knobs, not doing anything crazy. And the other thing is the amp can always come with, this is just the Tolex that somebody ordered. So you could always swap, if you don't want slats, you want rubber feet, that's an option. If you wanted a specific type of veneer on this wood face, always an option. And but I do like the top handles and I do like side handles. So when you're carrying it around, these are a bit easier. And then when you have to put it up on a cab, these become easier. So it's nice to have both when you have to take it out of a case versus, it's just nice to have them both. I can't think of anything else. I'll just exit with some, I'll play some random stuff, pick some sounds I like, and just do that for, 5 minutes of just non-clinical playing. And we'll just exit with that, if that sounds good. So now I've bugged up the tuning, so I'm just going to tune real quick, and and then we'll be off.